diary. Making the decision to immigrate to Calgary felt like I was placing an Amazon order for freedom, endless possibilities, social security, and a beautiful world of seamlessly integrated multiculturalism. Only instead of autofilling my credit card information, clicking buy now, and receiving my package the next day, I spent months filling out paperwork and acquiring various documentations. And I spent years waiting for my visa. And when my metaphorical package finally did arrive, it wasn't exactly what I ordered.
We're Onya and Tomi, and on Diary of a Naija Immigrant, we're talking about what happens after you buy that one-way ticket. We'll chat with guests and hear their immigration stories. We'll commiserate, celebrate wins, and gossip about recent microaggressions. Buckle up, y'all. Let's do it.
You ready?
Yes.
Woo-hoo.
Episode 2. Let's go.
Yay! It's episode 2, guys.
Woo.
I am so excited for this one.
Yes.
Today, I am with the one and only Tomi
Stop.
Ajele, the amazing, beautiful community builder.
Stop.
She's a beautiful Black woman who loves to build community around the BIPOC community, and she's someone who actually helped me bring out this. This is something I had, something I was passionate about, but I don't think I would be here doing this without Tomi, because she heard the concept and she saw something in it and she was really interested. So it just goes to show the kind of person Tomi is. Tomi is the editor-in-chief at Afros In Tha City, and she's just an amazing person.
Oh my God,
And
that's
I'm
so nice.
so excited to get to know you better on this. Because it feels like
Yes.
we get to know each other better on the podcast. Like, you just knew I
100%.
had 2 children.
Yeah, no, that
on the
was
last
a wild,
episode.
wild realization for me. That was crazy.
That's funny.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I can't wait to actually know you better and for
Yes.
our audience to also know who you are.
Yeah.
Because this first 2 episodes is just get to know your host.
Get to know your host.
Yeah, the
I'm into
people
it.
behind the Diary of a Naija Immigrant. And Tomi is also a second-generation immigrant.
Yes,
Her parents are first-generation immigrants. So today we'll be learning about her journey, having an
Yes.
African parent.
And
How
all that
fun.
Yeah. How fun. First of all, that was the nicest introduction ever. Thank you so
Aw.
much. That was so sweet. And yeah, also disclaimer to everybody that was listening right now. I only knew I was doing this interview 5 minutes ago. So if it's bad, it's not my fault. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'm
awesome.
excited.
Okay, Tomi, could you tell us about who Tomi is? We see Tomi on social media. We see you everywhere trying to build community, but we don't know who the person really is. Who is Tomi?
Okay. Oh my God. I ask that question every day in the mirror and then I cry. But I'm kidding. But okay. Yeah. Who am I? So I guess surface wise, I am work wise, which I actually hate answering the question of who are you and what do you do in the terms of work, but I am what I am and I'm a slave to capitalism. But essentially for work, I work in civic engagement. Basically my day job is civic engagement, voter education, that type of thing. On the side, I do a lot of freelance writing and different types of communications work, including media relations, PR, stuff like that. And then as you all know, I'm also the editor-in-chief of Afros In Tha City. So in general, I feel like my work and hobbies and all of that work really kind of intersects at advocacy, media, and communities and partnerships and community building. So anything that lives somewhere in there, I'm probably interested in and doing something with.
Amazing. You're so busy. How do you find time to breathe?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I feel like I have 2 modes. I have one mode where I'm just all in and working and always doing stuff and always busy. And then I have another mode where I'm just watching a full season of a Netflix show and taking nobody's calls
And
it's
going
just
on vacation.
And going on vacation.
She just came back from
and
a vacation.
Partying. Yeah. And drinking too much. So I'm it's all about balance.
I love it. We don't know what it is as first generation immigrant, but as a second generation, I would be curious to know how that actually feels being in your shoes.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like the journeys are just so different when it comes to immigrating as an adult or even as a kid versus being born here. And I think for me, it was just like so interesting because I remember my mom would always say, and I always quote her on this, but my mom used to always say, like, I didn't even know I was Black until I came to Canada. Like, she was just like, I just was. I was just a person.
Yeah.
And then I came here and then I was like, oh, I guess I'm a Black woman. Sure, fine. But the difference between that is that she already kind of knew who she was. And like, yes, we're all learning who we are every single day. But she already kind of knew who she was. She had a sense of identity as just like a human being. And then she came to this place that didn't really accept her and had to wrestle with that. And that is its whole own journey. And I think a part of me, even that though it's kind of crazy, a part of me was really, really envious of that, of the fact that she got to discover who she was just as a person first, because I never had that experience. I feel like at a very young age, I was very aware that like in some concept, like I was a problem, like my very existence was a problem. I was like, everything about just who I was in general was off. Like already I think like, yeah, probably I was like 2 or 3 until I realized like whatever I am or whoever I am is just like, it's not the ideal. It's not the default. I'm an outlier here. And so I feel like I developed my whole identity around trying to fix something. And that thing was me and my Blackness and who I was, you know? And so the idea that like not every Black person living in Canada felt like that, like because and again, they still had their own struggles, but I remember learning and like hearing from my mom about being like, no, like I know who I am. I'm a whole person. I always felt like a full person before coming here. And I was like so jealous and envious of that because I felt like, yeah, my whole programming from day one was like, you don't belong here. You're an other. You need to like figure out how to fit in, but also the best you can do will never be good enough. Like I feel like that was my default, you know, and it wasn't something. So because of that, I feel like it was so deeply rooted in me that unlearning that was so, so difficult. Because I feel like it's part of my DNA. And so it was always so interesting, like that experience coupled with being raised by immigrant parents, being raised by Nigerian parents, and being in a very white world. Like I didn't grow up around Nigerian kids. I didn't grow up around Black kids. So it was like a very, very strange upbringing, honestly. Like the whole thing was very strange. Like I literally, my parents, like I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We moved to like Calgary when I was probably like 3-ish, 4-ish. And we lived there for a bit and I started attending a church in Calgary and like started like building a community there. Then we moved to a small town outside of Calgary. And that was pretty much where I like grew up. And we lived there till I was like 12 or 13. So a lot of those formative years was me living in a small town where we were the only Black people that lived there. Like our friends would come to visit us and like go to like the gas station and be like, hey, I'm looking for the Black people. Like, where do they live?
Wow.
And they'd be like, up the hill. That was like my formative years, right? So we lived in this small town, like about an hour outside of Calgary. And we went into Calgary for like church and piano lessons and everything like that.
Interesting.
And then we would go like back to our small town. So my like formative years felt very isolating, both physically and mentally, because it was like you already feel kind of isolated as like this Black kid in this white world. But then geographically, we were pretty isolated too, because like our world was in Calgary and then we lived like an hour outside of Calgary. So there was just something very like, okay, I'm in this moment. I'm with like my white church friends. I'm in this space. And now I'm going to like go off into this like secluded world that I live in that like just feels very separate from everything that's happening over there. Like it was just such a strange, and I don't mean it to make it sound like it was this like awful dark childhood, because we also in our small town like had these great friends in that town, which were great. But everyone I was surrounded by was white, like everyone. And then my parents did have like a Nigerian community and stuff like that, and we would like go to gatherings and stuff, but honestly that was probably like a couple times a year. Like it just like wasn't really a thing. So yeah, I was just surrounded by white kids. Like it was just like, yeah, very, yeah.
Oh. So like, when did your parents actually move to Canada?
They moved in 1990. They would have probably moved in 1990, I think, because yeah, my brother was born in 89 and he was born in Nigeria. Oh. And then me and my two sisters were all born in Halifax. So yeah, they probably moved in 90.
And how do you think there's a difference between the way you feel or you felt growing up and the way your brother actually felt?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't think so. Yeah. I think there would have been if they had stayed for like 3 or 4 more years. I think if he had any memories of being a kid, and to be fair, like we haven't really sat down to like dissect it, so I'm kind of speaking for him. I don't really know, but I'm assuming just for like how we relate and how I feel like he was the best assimilator out of all of us. There's a space for Black men in it, and it's a small space, but there is in a way that there's not for Black women. So growing up, I always felt like he played that role really well and like found his niche within whiteness that really worked for him. So I didn't necessarily see him and kind of think like, yeah, this is somebody who like functions differently in this space because he like has a little bit more of that grounding. I think if he had like memories and stuff like that, it probably would have been different. Yeah. But because he was so young, I think we all had a very, very similar experience.
So one thing that struck my mind when just listening to you is, when did you actually realize? Because I feel like for myself, I'm trying to shield my son from hearing things like this person is Black and this person is white. And I don't even know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. But then I have it at the back of my mind saying, what if he already knows and he can see that he's different and the way he's treated is different from the way the other person is treated? So I'm just wondering, like, when did you actually realize? Did you feel like it was shielded away from you, or people pretended as if you were just the same, or just you hearing your friends saying, I'm looking for the Black people? Did that make you like, how did it make you? Just put me in that headspace, because I'm just confused. Am I doing it right?
Yeah, that is so interesting. And that dilemma, especially in 2023, is a really interesting one. Yeah. I think, for me, like, this was the 90s or the early 2000s. So obviously it was like a different time. But I'm like, you having that dilemma now is so fascinating to me. And like, but my hunch would be that he already knows. And that the absence of naming it can often cause just like even more stress around the situation. And the reason I say that is because like, yeah, I knew when I was about 2 or 3 and I didn't really need somebody to call it out. And then sure, my friends and everything were starting to make comments, and then, like language around like kids started to just get like a little bit more racist. And then, then it becomes a little bit more blatant. But like I was super, super young. And again, I think this experience would be so different for your son who actually like grew up in Nigeria. And so I don't think it would be the same at all. But I was super, super young when I realized like, oh, I'm different and in a bad way. And I don't want to be Black. Like I was probably about 3. So I think, and then again, then you start to like hear certain things or whatever. But my parents did not know that at all, and they didn't even like think that would be a thing, again because my mom was like, I didn't even know I was Black until I came here, and then you just kind of come, so it didn't even occur to them to like have those conversations with us. And as we were adults and we were talking about it, my mom was just so like, I had no idea, like truly just like had no idea, and like felt really guilty about it. And I was like, I do not think that's something anyone should feel guilty about, because it's like, it's their own experience. And like you said, you're just doing the best you can to be like, what's the best approach for you and for my son and all of those things. But I think that as a society, we're so far from like true integration, honestly. And I use that word, like I use a really retro like word like integration, because I actually think we're like still so far from that, to the point where I think really young kids know. I think they know even before someone like is like aggressively mean to them or says something like targeted. And again, I think the experience is so different for your son, but I think on some level he knows something, you know? And I think what was always so empowering for me the older I get, and which is why like I feel like in a lot of ways like university set me free, was because I was given language to talk about my experience. And I felt like growing up I just had this experience, and like luckily I had siblings so we could kind of like talk about certain things. But you know, I never had language to actually talk about like what I was going through, and once I was given that, I felt like that changed everything for me. So I do feel like I would never shy away from potentially giving someone the language to kind of just better understand their environment. And I don't know if it's ever really too soon to kind of have those conversations, even though I totally get what you mean. Like, you don't want to put something in someone's head if it's not already in their head. Exactly. You know what I mean? You don't want to be like, kids might look at you as different, and him being like, what? I didn't think I was different. I was just chilling. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to put ideas into people's head at all. So I don't know. Like, I have no idea the right way to like approach that, but I don't know. Scary. It is scary.
And that's the same way probably your parents felt, because they didn't want to put the ideas in your head. 100%. But did you ever feel like you needed to have that conversation with your parents?
I don't know if I would have handled that well, to be honest. Like a conversation about that. I think I just wanted to reject it. And like the idea of like my parents telling me that I could be like proud about who I was or something like that, I just know myself, I would have hated it. And I would have been like, no, I'm not proud. This is not who I am. This is not my world. I want to like go over there and like be like them and like be like the white kids. So I just already know I would have rejected it. But I absolutely think a version of me, I would have benefited from a conversation like that.
You might not have enjoyed it then, but then in the long run it would have just been something that you'd go back and you're like, oh so that was really good for me.
Exactly.
Walk me through your experience and why you actually resented your parents, and like just what was the dilemma there?
Oh, the vibe. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I feel like there's so many things and so many of these sort of stereotypes around like immigrant parents and all of those things. And I see the reason for it. I see the reason for, you know, the strictness. I see the reason for the, you know, excessive like discipline or whatever that looks like. But I think, again, especially growing up around white kids, and there was such a stark difference for me, like such a stark difference where like I feel like everything was like so strict in my household. It felt incredibly
Give us a
strict.
visual example.
Oh my gosh, just like everything, like whether it was like bedtimes at 8, no sugar, no like I remember when I'd go to my friend's house and just see that they had like bread, like store-bought bread in their like cupboards, and was like so jealous. And
really?
The fact,
bread?
Yeah.
But bread is like a normal thing in an African home.
Well, the thing is about this is like my mom would always make bread, and then it always just like had all this like random like gross like healthy stuff.
Interesting.
And I hated it.
Your mom was like the elite African parent.
No, and she would make everything, and she would always, and like Monday night was always like Farina night, and I was always like, oh, I don't want this. Wow. Like I want like, and then we would do like, we would literally, there was a big chunk of my childhood where we would I had to wake up every single morning at 5 a.m. we were doing devotions. We also had to do either yoga or go for a run or do Taibo.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Are you sure you grew up in an African
No, I know
home?
the yoga. I know yoga. My mom was a bit crazy. She was a bit like worldly in that way.
Wow.
Where we do yoga, but we do either Taibo or go running or something like that. So we always had to do some sort of like fitness thing. we also all grew up with music. So that was a big part of my childhood and my adulthood. You know, I ended up teaching music all throughout university and everything like that. But we like went to this church and we had this like awesome pianist, and she would teach like all the kids, and she was like really mean. And so everyone, like, she made all the kids cry, and everybody wanted to quit, and one by one every single one of our friends quit, but my mom like never let us. And so it was just always, and like the intensity of it, like everything was so intense. We had music lessons and we had to practice our piano every single day for an hour a day. And my mom used to set a timer for 55 minutes where we had to do exactly what our teacher had written in our dictation books. And then for the last 5 minutes, we could just like play whatever we wanted on the piano. But like, also we were homeschooled. So like everything was just,
There was a structure.
There was a structure to everything. And it wasn't even like we really, like, we had a world outside of it for sure, but like my family world really consumed a lot of my world. So it was just like, again, like physically, like go to bed like early, wake up early, you know, whether you're doing your workouts, you're doing all this stuff. Spiritually, obviously super, super intense. Like wake up. Yes, you're always like doing devotionals and you're studying, like all of this stuff. Like that I didn't feel like I had the option to like waver from Christianity like in any way or play anything. Like that was just not an option. Or the idea of like my friends would be like, oh yeah, when are you allowed to date? Like I'm allowed to date like 15. And I was just like, that's funny. Like I don't think I'm allowed to date ever. Like just like all of those kinds of things. It was just, everything felt like it was like so intense. And then when it came to like the grades, like if your grades aren't like
very important.
Oh yeah. And if your grades aren't like top tier, then that was like you failed essentially. And so like, yeah, I think everything just felt like it was so serious. It was so intense. And then I would like look at some of my friends who were friends with their parents, and it just did not make sense to me. Like it just did not make sense to me. I was like, I cannot imagine being friends with my parents. Like they were an authority first, an authority second, an authority third. Like there was just no friendship in there. Like, and I don't know. I just feel like the word that feels like it describes my upbringing and my relationship to my parents was just that like strict. Like I just felt like discipline and like following the rules and like living by the book and all of that was like the most important thing. Which is so funny now to me because like as an adult, I feel like they're actually some of the most like open people that I know. And it's so cool to like watch them change and grow and watch them sort of evolve. So that's been really cool. But yeah, I like sometimes look at them today and I'll be like, where were these people like when I was growing up? Like I'm like, you'd be great parents now. But I'm like, it was brutal.
I think it's just a generic thing about African parents, because even people always say African parents and African grandparents are two different people.
True.
So like they've gotten to that age where they could be grandparents.
Exactly, and they are. So that's
and they are exactly. And
exactly.
Like sometimes my dad would do something for my children, and I'm like, who are you?
So true.
So like it's just they grow up.
Yeah.
And at that point, speaking as a parent, you're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing right.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to do the best for you.
Yeah.
But then how can I imbibe this in you when you're just so young and too carefree to actually listen?
Yeah.
So like it's just a balance of how do I do this and do it right?
It's true. And it's so ironic because it's just like everything that I resented my parents so deeply for, I credit for honestly like most of the good things in my life today.
Exactly.
And most of the things I'm grateful for and most of the things that I feel like really allow me to live the exact type of life that I want and like achieve what I want. I actually credit a lot of those things.
Tomi, one question that keeps, because your name is Tomi and Tomi is a Yoruba name. You're originally Yoruba, are you? Okay. So do you speak your local language, Yoruba?
No, I don't. Growing up, I feel like we could understand it because my parents were still like speaking it a lot in the house. But no, I don't speak Yoruba, yeah.
And do you eat any Yoruba food? Did you grow up with the food? Because what I'm hearing now is that your Your mom was a very healthy eater. And
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of that.
yeah. On Monday nights. And then it was always like gatherings. Like, and so like anytime we would like do like, yeah, go to like Nigerian gatherings or have like people over,
Yeah.
then that would always be like my mom's go-to. Like she would always make like, yeah, Yoruba dishes and stuff like that. But again, growing up, I always just like hated that. And if my mom was cooking something, like I would just like hate that because I'd be like, I'm having friends over. They're gonna make fun. Like, because I mean, you know how white kids are. They love to talk about how non-white people smell. And like, they love to, like, that was always like this big thing. And so the idea of my mom, like, making stuff like that in the house, if we're like having a friend over or like bringing something like to like a potluck or something, like I was always just like, Mom, no, like this is so humiliating, like make muffins like the other white moms.
Yeah. Going back, do you think you would have done the same thing, or what would you have, like, what, just walk me through that experience?
I know, I feel like going back, I'm like, because sometimes when I will ask like, yeah, what would you have wanted to like do differently, or like, yeah, I wish we'd have these conversations or something like that. And I'm just like, I was so resistant to everything that had anything to do with being Nigerian. I was so resistant to, because I knew it was the one thing kind of holding me back from being what I felt like was to being loved or like being lovable, you know? I felt like that was the one thing kind of getting in my way. So I was so resistant to like all of that stuff. And looking back, I'm like, I wish I was like so much more open. I wish I had learned Yoruba like growing up. I wish like I regret so much.
You can listen to the rest of this conversation by searching The Diary of a Naija Immigrant on cgsw.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Diary of a Naija Immigrant is presented by Afros in the City in collaboration with